Sweet Music in Harlem by Debbie A. Taylor, illustrated by Frank Morrison. Genre: realistic fiction has characters, setting, and plots that seem real, but the author has made them up. As you read, look for how characters play different roles in the plot. Question of the week: what unexpected influence do we have on those around us? "CJ, where can my hat be?" called Uncle Click from the bathroom. "That photographer from High Note magazine will be out front in an hour, and I've got to look good. It's not every day a Harlem trumpet player gets his picture taken." CJ smiled at the old poster on the wall. A young Uncle Click with a snappy black beret blew a gleaming trumpet. CJ looked at that poster every morning and dreamed of standing on stage, blowing his own sweet music for a room full of admiring folks. During the 4 years that he had lived with Uncle Click, CJ had learned to hold his clarinet just right, to practice every day, and to keep a penny in his shoe for good luck. When he blew out the candles on his birthday cake next week, he'd wish that one day his own picture would be on a poster too. But for now, CJ just tried to make his notes ring out clear and strong from his dented second-hand clarinet. Uncle Click chuckled as he walked into the room. "Those were the days," he said, nodding at the poster. "Back then I played the meanest trumpet in Harlem. Now all I do is lose things." "Don't worry, Uncle Click, I'll find your hat," CJ said. "Where could you have left it?" "Well," said Uncle Click as he looked behind the couch, "last night I stopped at the barber shop and the diner. Later on I jammed at the Midnight Melody Club." Uncle Click's voice trailed off as he searched under the cushion of his favorite chair. When music was on Uncle Click's mind, he forgot everything else. He could have left his hat anywhere, and there wasn't much time to find it. CJ ran down the street. The striped pole outside Garlick's barber shop glistened like a candy cane. Inside, the place buzzed as everyone talked at once. At Garlick's, neighborhood news traveled faster than a subway train speeding downtown. "Did you see that Kansas City drummer cut loose at the Midnight Melody last night?" one of the men shouted. "Yeah, he was cool, but it sure was hot in there," someone else replied. Mr. Garlick talked louder than anyone. A toothpick jutting from the corner of his mouth bounced up and down as he scolded a fidgety customer. "Mr. Garlick," CJ called, but no one heard him. "Mr. Garlick," CJ said again, louder. The barber finally spotted CJ and smiled. "Looky here, it's my favorite young jazzman. Mark my words, he'll be a headliner soon. What can I do for you, CJ?" "A photographer from High Note magazine is coming soon," CJ blurted out, and Uncle Click lost his hat. "Did he leave it here?" "Your uncle didn't leave his hat, but he did leave this," said Mr. Garlick, holding up a shiny watch. "When Click blows his horn, that barber pole spins, but he is a little forgetful." CJ thanked Mr. Garlick and slipped the watch into his pocket. "You say some photographer is coming from High Note?" Mr. Garlick said. "Well, a photo without Big Charlie Garlick wouldn't be much of a picture, right, folks?" As CJ hurried away, he could hear the people in the barber shop buzzing about the photographer. "I've got to find that hat," CJ muttered to himself. CJ rushed around the corner and into the jam-packed eat-and-run diner. Just inside the door, he jumped back as a waitress zipped past, balancing plates of ham and eggs on one arm and home fries and sausage on the other. The waitress grinned at CJ, her apron still swaying from her dash across the room. "Hey, CJ," she said. "Hi, Mattie D," said CJ. "Did Uncle Click leave his hat here? A photographer from High Note magazine is coming to take his picture in a few minutes, and Uncle Click needs his hat." "Honey, Click didn't leave his hat, but he did leave this," said Mattie D. She pulled a handkerchief from her pocket and dropped it into CJ's hand. Your uncle leaves his things all over Harlem, but when he wails on his trumpet, the salt shakers bounce. And if you keep practicing, one day you'll make them bounce too. Thanks for the hanky, Mattie D, CJ said. Did you say a photographer from High Note is coming? Mattie D asked. I'd love to be in the picture, especially if I can stand right next to your handsome uncle. As CJ left the diner, he could hear Mattie D telling her customers about the photographer. But I've still got to find Uncle Click's hat, CJ moaned. CJ raced down the block, then bounded down the stairs of the Midnight Melody Club. Even though the club was closed, 8 musicians were crowded onto the small stage, playing as if it were still showtime. The bass player's eyes glistened as he plucked his instrument. The vibraphone player tapped the keys with his eyes closed. CJ, the drummer shouted without losing the beat, we're saving a spot for you here. I reckon you'll be joining us in a few years. A woman strolled toward CJ from the back of the club. She didn't seem to notice that it wasn't nighttime. She still wore a fancy dress and rings glittered on her fingers. Miss Alma, CJ called, a photographer from High Note magazine is coming to take Uncle Click's picture and he can't find his hat. Did he leave it on stage last night? Canary Alma shook her head. Your uncle didn't leave his hat here, but he did leave this, she said, and plucked a bow tie from the piano bench. He's forgetful, but when Click blows his trumpet, the wallpaper curls. CJ thanked Canary Alma and slid the tie over his wrist. A photographer from High Note, Canary Alma exclaimed, smoothing her dress. My face next to your uncle's will give that photo a touch of class. CJ's shoulders drooped as he left the Midnight Melody Club. He didn't want to disappoint Uncle Click, but he just couldn't find that hat anywhere. CJ dragged his feet up the steps of the brownstone where his uncle waited. A lump like a sour ball wedged in CJ's throat. Uncle Click, CJ said, I didn't find your hat, but I did find these. He held out the watch, the handkerchief, and the bow tie. Uncle Click looked at CJ and a huge smile spread across his face. Looks like you found something else, too, he said, pointing behind CJ. CJ turned around. Big Charlie Garlic, Mattie D, and Canary Alma were walking down the street toward them. But they weren't alone. They were followed by men from the barber shop, people from the diner, and musicians from the Midnight Melody Club. There were also folks CJ had never seen before and people he'd only seen on posters or record covers. Hey, Click, called Charlie Garlic. You sure know how to gather a crowd. Wasn't me, said Uncle Click, winking at CJ. CJ could hardly believe his eyes. Here were some of the greatest musicians and singers in Harlem. It was like seeing the sun, the moon, and the stars all shining at once. Your nephew drew a crowd without even blowing a note, said Charlie Garlic. He won't have any trouble packing them in at the Apollo in a few years. I've never seen so many jazzy folks in one place and right in front of my very own home, said Uncle Click, a twinkle in his eyes. This really is something special. Who needs a hat to appreciate that? The photographer's here, someone yelled. Everyone scrambled to get a good spot on the steps. There were so many people, some ended up sitting on the curb and standing on the sidewalk. The photographer laughed from behind his camera. Guess I'd better use a wider lens, he called. As the photographer adjusted his camera, the crowd settled into position for the picture. Smile, the photographer finally shouted, and then pop, a bright light flashed. Laughter and clapping filled the air. That night, as CJ lay in bed, light from the hallway crept into his room. Uncle Click stood in the doorway with a large box wrapped in bright red paper. I know your birthday's not until next week, said Uncle Click, but I wanted to give you this before all the magic of today wears off. CJ opened the box and lifted out a black case. His eyes widened as he raised the lid. Inside, nestled in velvet, was a brand new clarinet. "It's perfect," CJ said, cradling the horn gently in his hands. CJ hugged his uncle tightly. Then he noticed something else in the box. "Uncle Click, your hat!" "Well, look at that," said Uncle Click. "It must have fallen in there last night when I was wrapping your present." "You know, a jazz man like you is going to need a good hat," said Uncle Click as he placed the beret neatly on CJ's head. "Besides, I'm getting used to not wearing one." CJ adjusted the hat and put the clarinet to his lips. He started to blow while his fingers danced over the keys. Uncle Click beamed and nodded to the beat as CJ's own sweet music rang out clear and strong for the most admiring audience in all of Harlem.